After my wife, Clara, died 3 years ago, I was consumed by grief. I heard about a hallucinogenic mushroom, the see your hand blue mushroom, that supposedly allowed you to see the deceased. Desperate, I bought some and ate them. The result was a trip to the hospital, and when I woke up, Clara wasn't there. In despair, I decided to end my life. Before I did, I signed the organ donor card Clara had always wanted me to sign. As my soul left my body, I heard my children, Olivia and Ethan, crying and begging me not to leave. Then I saw Clara, my dead wife, smiling through tears, speaking to the man in the bed next to mine. Ethan, she said, that fool agreed to donate his kidney to you. Consumed by rage and betrayal, I opened my eyes to find myself reborn. 3 years earlier, there had been a disturbance at the hospital. I was stabbed twice by a patient's family member, and Clara had jumped in front of me, taking the final, fatal blow. With her dying breath, she'd asked me to donate her organs. I agreed, never suspecting it was all a lie. 3 years later, unable to bear Clara's loss, I'd eaten the mushrooms, landed in the hospital, and then killed myself. I hadn't realized, however, that my kidney would be donated to her first love, Ethan. Russell. My children knelt by my bedside, sobbing, while in another room, Clara comforted Ethan, who was suffering from kidney failure. The thought of dying for nothing, of being used, made me seethe. The doorbell rang, jolting me awake. In my previous life, Clara had brought Ethan home, saying she wanted to be with him during his final days. I'd watched Ethan die at the crematorium, never suspecting it was all a plot, a scheme to get my kidney. Clara, how could you disregard our children for him? They had suffered so much because of her in my past life. This time, I would protect them. The insistent ringing continued. When I opened the door, Clara snapped, Mark, I've been ringing forever. Are you blind and deaf? Can't you see Ethan's sick? What's that to me? I replied coldly. Clara stared at me in disbelief. How dare you speak to me like that? Have you lost your mind? Turning to the man behind her, she said, Ethan, don't mind him. Come in. She helped Ethan inside. He was pale and shaky, a walking corpse. He gave me a weak smile. Clara, Mark, sorry to bother you. In my past life, I had been jealous of this effeminate man, even making myself sick with worry. I'd even eaten poisonous mushrooms hoping to see Clara. Olivia ran over and, seeing the frail man, cried out, Mommy! Who is he? I don't like him. Clara's eyes narrowed. Olivia, I've spoiled you rotten. How dare you speak to your uncle like that? Apologize. I laughed. Just like before, Clara always sided with Ethan, regardless of who was right or wrong. Olivia had done nothing wrong, yet she was being forced to apologize. I remembered the house fire. Olivia trapped in her room, desperately calling for her mother. What had Clara done? Then, she'd given Ethan priority access to the escape route. I, on duty at the hospital, had received my daughter's charred body. When I confronted Clara, her eyes had darted away. Olivia was young, she'd said, but Ethan couldn't risk further injury. He was already sick. So, my daughter deserved to be scarred for life? So, my daughter deserved to live in the shadows? The thought enraged me. I pulled Olivia behind me. Clara, he can stay, but I won't cook a single meal for him. Before Clara could argue, Ethan interrupted. Clara, don't let me come between you two. Clara, touched, wiped away a tear. Ethan, you've suffered enough. I took Olivia back to our room, leaving the two to their sickening display of affection. It was time to end this marriage. Ethan had barely recovered from surgery, and Clara was already doting on him, bringing him home. Yet, when I'd been in a car accident, protecting Clara, and ended up with a permanent limp, she'd been cold. It's just a limp, she'd said. It's not the end of the world. That night, I contacted my lawyer and printed divorce papers. The next morning, in front of everyone, I handed the 2 thin sheets to Clara. She had prepared a lavish breakfast spread, a stark contrast to her usual aversion to cooking. It was clear she only bothered for Ethan. Ethan, try the eggplant, she said sweetly. It's your favorite. As she served him, I slammed the papers on the table. Her hand froze. What are you doing? What's this? She demanded. I don't want to argue with you in front of Ethan. I was exhausted. The pain of my past life numbed me, and now I was reliving it. It means what it says. I want a divorce. I can't stand watching my wife cater to another man. I've had enough. My words were calm, but I felt like a madman. Clara's expression shifted from confusion to anger. What about the children? They're so young. Are you even fit to be a father? She always used the children as a shield. She thought giving birth to them gave her immunity. But had she ever truly cared for them? When Olivia was born, I rubbed my temples and left the table. Seeing my silence, Clara pressed her supposed advantage. Why aren't you saying anything? I earn more than you. You should be grateful. I wanted to retort, to question, to argue, but I was too tired. Let's eat, I finally said. Suddenly, Ethan spoke. Mommy, I feel sick. Clara glanced at him dismissively. Don't be dramatic. You're probably faking it. Don't be like your lying father. Her words infuriated me. I stood up. How dare you speak to our son like that? What do you mean? I rushed to Ethan's side. He was pale and covered in a rash. As a doctor, I recognized the symptoms instantly. It was an allergic reaction. Ethan was allergic to eggplant. I never bought it, which meant I looked at the table. There, in the center, sat a glistening plate of eggplant, Ethan's favorite dish, and the source of my son's allergy. Clara, don't you know Ethan's allergic to eggplant? Fear flickered in Clara's eyes. How could I know? You never told me. Hadn't I? Impossible. I had told her countless times, but she dismissed me. We have a nanny. Why should I worry? She assumed the nanny bore all responsibility. My heart grew colder. I scooped up Ethan and ran to the car. Clara followed. Will he be all right? He's usually so energetic. A severe allergic reaction could be fatal. Didn't she understand? I ignored her and focused on my son. Clara tried to get in the car, but I stopped her. Olivia was still at home. I couldn't leave her alone with Clara. Olivia's still at home. If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you. Surprise flickered in Clara's eyes. She clearly hadn't expected my sudden change in behavior. Mark, are you crazy? I would never hurt Olivia. Looking at her furrowed brow, I hesitated. Olivia was her daughter. I had to trust her, just this once. I gave Clara a long look and drove off. At the hospital, Ethan was immediately rushed into surgery. As a doctor, I could have operated myself, but as a father, I couldn't risk the slightest mistake. I couldn't take that chance. The operating room light glared red. I paced anxiously, trying to recall what had happened in my past life. Ethan's allergic reaction hadn't happened then. Only Olivia. And the fire. Was it because I wasn't pandering to Clara this time? Because I'd asked for a divorce? The thought took root, fueling my anxiety. Olivia would be fine. She had to be. Finally, the light went off. My friend, Dr. Liam, emerged. Mark, he's okay. Don't worry. Relief washed over me. Ethan was wheeled out shortly after. As I pushed his bed towards the elevator, I bumped into a chaotic crowd. Doctors swarmed around a gurney carrying a badly burned girl. Her body was charred and bloody, wounds oozing smoke and blood. I quickly averted my gaze. This was how Olivia had looked in my previous life, though not quite so severe. My hand trembled. I forced myself to focus on Ethan. Once his breathing stabilized, I called Clara. The surgery went well. He's fine. Silence met my words. Something felt wrong. Clara? Say something. Her voice trembled. Mark, the house, it's on fire. My mind went blank. Fire? No, that girl couldn't be Olivia. How could there be a fire? Did Ethan do it? Where's Olivia? At the mention of Ethan, Clara's tone hardened. It wasn't Ethan's fault. Olivia was playing with a lighter. I was busy getting Ethan out and, don't worry, she'll be fine. She's a tough kid. Her words made me want to vomit. How could a mother say such things? Where's Olivia? Where's my daughter? Impatience laced her voice. Calm down, Mark. The firemen must have rescued her. She's probably fine. It's not like she inhaled all that smoke like Ethan. She actually sounded concerned for him. I wanted to throw the phone. I'd always thought Clara simply didn't know how to be a mother, that she resented me for stealing Ethan. But now, I realized she was simply unfit to be a mother. Suddenly, the burned girl flashed into my mind. I stumbled towards the emergency room. Dr. Chin, what's wrong? A nurse asked. How tall was she? How old? I croaked. Not very tall, about the same age as your daughter, the nurse replied thoughtfully. My world crumbled. Had Rebirth been for nothing? Was I doomed to live a pathetic life, unable to protect my daughter? Pain ripped through me. I struggled to breathe, my chest constricting. My legs gave way, and I collapsed onto the floor. Just as I was about to break down, a small voice called out, Daddy, Olivia. I turned, and there she was, running towards me. Olivia, you're here, but you were burned. She looked at me with wide, confused eyes. I'm not hurt, Daddy. What was going on? I looked towards a woman striding purposefully towards us, a trench coat swirling around her. It was Clara. Even at 30-something, she looked barely older than 20. I'd fallen for her at first sight and pursued her relentlessly. Her father had died of a rare disease, and I'd become a specialist, trying to help her mother. But her mother had died too, and Clara had blamed me for curing her too late. Clara stopped before us, smoothing back her hair, looking down at me with disdain. Get up, Mark. Don't you know a man shouldn't kneel in public? I tried to stand but couldn't. Clara reached down and helped me up. Her touch startled me. It had been so long since she touched me like that. I'd forgotten how it felt. Olivia, tell Daddy what happened. The house was on fire. How did you get out? Olivia placed her small hand in mine. I saw the paper catch fire, so I went to get Mommy. Mommy helped the man get out, then she helped me. I waited for Mommy outside, Daddy. So, that's what happened. But the image of the burned girl still haunted me. Clara spoke, her voice sharp. Are you saying I deliberately left Olivia behind? Weren't you? I retorted. If Olivia hadn't escaped herself, would you have cared? Disbelief and sadness flickered in Clara's eyes. Sadness? Why would she be sad? Think what you want. Where's Ethan? I need to see him. The weakness in my legs had subsided. I stood up and led her to Ethan's room. Just as we reached the door, the nurse rushed over. Ms. Russell, Mr. Russell is awake. He's asking for you. Clara turned and left without a backward glance at our son. I grabbed her arm. Weren't you going to see Ethan? Her brow furrowed, her voice laced with worry. Didn't you hear? Ethan's awake. Ethan will be fine. She wrenched her arm free and rushed away. I watched as she embraced Ethan, as he wept, as she comforted him. It was clear. There was no hope for us. I entered Ethan's room and took Olivia's hand. Ethan was awake, looking at me timidly. Daddy, where's Mommy? I miss her. My throat tightened. Mommy will be here soon. You've been such a good boy. Disappointment clouded his eyes. Am I not good enough? Does Mommy hate me and Olivia? I stroked his hair. No, Ethan. You're a little man, a strong boy. You have to be brave like Daddy. Don't cry. Ethan's eyes widened. I'm not crying. I stayed with them until they fell asleep. Later that night, Clara returned. I stared at her. You're not welcome here. She pushed me. Don't be ridiculous, Mark. I want to see my son. You don't deserve to see him. Sign the divorce papers. If you can't take care of the children, don't fight for custody. She shrieked. Are you crazy? I'm perfectly sane, Clara. I'd had enough. For the sake of my children, I wouldn't stay entangled with her any longer. I'm tired, Clara. Let's just end this. I turned away, refusing to argue. Clara's voice was low, almost pleading. Are you serious? I touched Ethan's head. Yes. She stood silently for a moment, then left. I wondered what she was thinking. Perhaps she thought I was being difficult again. Before Ethan, we had shared moments of happiness. She'd call me Honey in a sweet voice. She'd devour the meals I cooked, her dimples flashing. I want to eat your cooking forever, she declared. And I, looking at her adoringly, had promised, I'll cook for you forever. The next day, my childhood friend and lawyer, Sarah, came to see me. She was as aloof as ever. Sarah, thank you for handling the divorce, I said. Her cool expression softened slightly. You always have to hit rock bottom, don't you? Her words reminded me of the night I ate the mushrooms. Sarah had rushed to my house, snatched the mushrooms, and yelled at me. Mark, have some. Self-respect. After everything Clara did to you, you're still willing to die for her? Just because she took a knife for you? Is it really worth it? At the time, I was drowning in grief, blinded by the loss of Clara. I'd pushed Sarah away, spewing venomous words. Sarah, you're not Clara. You have no right to talk about her like that. I had defended Clara fiercely, unwilling to hear a word against her. But Sarah had still managed to get me to the hospital. She'd arrived too late. I'd already slit my wrists. She must have hated me for throwing my life away. I looked into Sarah's eyes. She met my gaze, then quickly looked away. A passerby bumped into her, and I instinctively reached out to steady her. Clara saw. She was standing nearby, holding a lunchbox, probably for Ethan. She froze, her curly hair ruffled by the wind. Then, her face hardened, her expression icy. She marched towards us. Without a word, she slapped Sarah. Mark, so this is why you want a divorce. For your little childhood sweetheart. Sarah, proud and pampered since childhood, had never been slapped before. She was stunned. Clara, stop it. She's my lawyer. Clara ignored me, her gaze fixed on Sarah. She raised her hand to strike again, but Sarah caught it. She wasn't someone to be trifled with. She slapped Clara back. That's for what you owe me, she said, then slapped her again. And this one is for him. Him? I stared at her. Him? The commotion drew Ethan out of his room. Despite his hospital gown, his undeniable handsomeness was apparent. He was the reason Clara had remained obsessed with him all these years. He rushed to Clara's side, protectively shielding her. Mark, how could you let another woman hit your wife? Are you even a man? He demanded, his face flushed with anger. Clara sobbed in his arms. Ethan, it's okay. I'm fine. Go back to your room. Ethan stroked her hair tenderly. Clara, how can you be so forgiving after what he's done to you? Forgiving? Who was forgiving whom? Sarah crossed her arms, looking at me with a mixture of pity and amusement. Mark, you really let this guy steal your wife? And look what happened to you. How pathetic. She was mocking Ethan. I didn't want to argue. A simple divorce shouldn't be this messy. Just then, Dr. Liam rushed over, looking agitated. Mark, trouble. That old man's family is causing a scene. There are a lot of them, and they've brought weapons. A scene? Weapons? Suddenly, I remembered. Clara taking the knife for me. Was it happening already? Everything was moving so much faster this time around. I put down the divorce papers and followed Dr. Liam downstairs. The lobby was swarming with angry people. Even the usually formidable head nurse couldn't control the situation. They were just as aggressive as I remembered, looking more like debt collectors than grieving relatives. I had already called the police. Now, all I could do was wait and try to contain the situation. I hung up the phone just as a fist slammed into the side of my head. You're Dr. Chin, right? You killed my father. I steadied myself. I'm a doctor. I save lives. Your father slit his wrists in the middle of the night. We did everything we could. The man ignored my explanation and swung a club at me. His relatives joined in, wailing and shouting accusations. Give us back our uncle. Murderous hospital. Old man, why did you leave me alone? The situation was spiraling out of control. All I could do was wait for the police. Clara, Ethan, and Sarah had come downstairs. They stood at a distance, watching. I waited for the knife. This time, Clara, would you still take the blow for me? I closed my eyes, bracing for the pain, but it never came. Instead, I heard a gasp. Sarah. I opened my eyes in disbelief. Blood trickled from Sarah's lips. She clutched her stomach, sinking to her knees. Sarah, Why you? She smiled weakly. Mark, you idiot. After everything Clara did to you, did you really think she'd take a knife for you? My trembling hand stilled. It was my heart that trembled now. Mark, don't you remember? You were unconscious after the first stab. It was me who took the knife. It was always me. My eyes widened. It had been Sarah. She had taken that blow for me. She disappeared for a month afterward. She'd been recovering in the hospital, and I, in my grief and anger, had pushed her away, choosing to poison myself instead. She had just been discharged, and I had treated her so cruelly. Fate was a cruel mistress. Someone, help her. I scooped Sarah into my arms, apologizing profusely. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I was so stupid. I didn't recognize you. Sarah caressed my face. Mark, I don't regret it. Not then, not now. I'll never regret saving you. But you're awful. You promised to marry me when we were little. Liar. In that moment, I finally understood Sarah's feelings. As I carried her past Clara, she tugged at my sleeve. Honey. In the past, that word would have filled me with warmth. I would have forgiven her, blamed myself, but no longer. Clara, you're not young anymore. Don't talk to me like that. I'm not the same Mark who worshipped you. Her eyes reddened. Please don't be like this. I know you don't like Ethan. I won't see him anymore. Let's get back together. Let's remarry. I stared at her as if she were insane. Are you joking? I'll never remarry you. She laughed nervously, wiping away tears. Fine. Don't be angry. Let's eat cake. It's your birthday. I wanted to refuse, but she mentioned the children. I hated sweet cake. Ethan loved sweet things. So the birthday cake was sickeningly sweet. Clara put her arm around Ethan. Ethan, Mommy and Daddy will always be together, right? Ethan shyly nodded. Okay. Olivia, however, said, no. The air thickened. Hurt flashed across Clara's face. Why not, Olivia? Don't you like Mommy? Olivia hid behind me. I don't want Mommy to be like she was before. If Mommy and Daddy are together, she'll be like that again. Clara grabbed Olivia's arm. No, Olivia. I promise. Mommy. It hurts. Olivia struggled to pull away. Enough. I roared, flipping the cake over. Clara's forced smile froze. Clara, do you really think I don't know what you're doing? I dragged her into the bedroom. She shrugged off her coat, revealing a provocative outfit. She untied her hair and wrapped her arms around my neck, pressing herself against me, trying to kiss me. I turned my head away and threw her onto the bed. You arranged for those people to attack me, didn't you? Clara looked confused. What? What are you talking about? I took off my glasses, rubbing my temples. The hospital, the attack, the knife. You think you were so clever? Panic flashed across Clara's face. No, honey, let me explain. I laughed coldly. Explain? Explain that you hired those thugs to stab me? That you planned to fake your death while I, heartbroken and suicidal, donated my kidney to your precious Ethan Russell? Clara stumbled back, stunned. No, Mark, that wasn't my plan. I just want to be with you. I know I was wrong. She grabbed my sleeve. Please, give me another chance. I can't lose you. I pulled away. It's too late, Clara. There's someone else. I left the bedroom. Ethan and Olivia were silent. I felt terrible for them. Clara emerged a few moments later, her clothes straightened, a perfect smile plastered on her face. But I saw the redness around her eyes. She'd been crying. Clara had never cried for me. She'd always looked at me with impatience and disgust. Mommy's leaving now. I'll see you soon, she said, then left. She disappeared from my life for 2 months. When the children missed her, she'd video call them secretly, not wanting me to know. Everything felt strange, unsettling. 2 months later, after a surgery, Sarah looked at me, her face grim. Mark, there's something I need to tell you. Brace yourself. I just operated on a patient and discovered she's missing a kidney. I frowned. That wasn't unusual. Some people are born with only one kidney. That patient is Clara, Sarah continued. I was stunned. Clara? Missing a kidney? Had she given it to Ethan? Did she love him that much? I wasn't angry or jealous, just bewildered. How could a woman go to such lengths for a man? Pushing down my questions, I went to Clara's room. She lay frail and weak, hooked up to machines. She opened her eyes, staring at me for a long time. Then, tears streamed down her face. "Mark, I was wrong. I regret everything," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I shouldn't have been obsessed with that scumbag. He's a monster." She trembled with rage, the foreneedle almost slipping out. "Calm down," I said, gently restraining her. "What happened? Where have you been these past 2 months?" Clara closed her eyes. "Ethan. He tortured me. He has kidney failure, and my kidney was a match. He begged me, tricked me into giving it to him. I told him to go to his parents, but he refused. He had me kidnapped. They drugged me, but I still felt it, the pain. He took my kidney. It hurt so much, Mark." So, Ethan had resorted to illegal means. "Telling me won't help you, Clara. When you're better, go to the police. Report him. I'll pay your medical bills. There will be nurses to take care of you. But I won't be coming back." I knew she was trying to gain my sympathy, to make me forgive her, pity her, protect her. But I couldn't. The memories of my past life were too vivid. Whatever love I had once felt for her was gone. Clara stared at me in disbelief. "No, Mark. You loved me. You said you'd love me even if I became an old hag. Now that I'm missing a kidney, you think I'm a burden?" I turned to face her. "Clara, I never thought you were a burden. Have you forgotten? After your mother died, when all those creditors came after, you held my hand, begging me not to leave you. I didn't abandon you then, even though you were struggling. But what did you do in return?" I spoke calmly, laying out the facts. She seemed to have forgotten how I'd studied medicine for her father, how I'd become her mother's doctor. She'd forgotten how I'd offered her a lifeline when she was drowning in debt. She had taken that lifeline, broken my fingernails, and snapped the bones in my hand. The memory of the crunching bones still made me wince. And after breaking my hand, she'd simply walked away. Clara went mad. She ripped out the 4, blood spurting everywhere. She was trying to stop me from leaving, but she forgot she was missing a kidney. She couldn't move. Any sudden movement would cause excruciating pain. She tried to get out of bed, but collapsed, screaming in agony, curling up on the floor like a baby. "Mark, help me. Please don't leave me." I sighed. I couldn't. I left, calling for a nurse. They would take care of her. We were done, Clara. Ethan went to prison. I didn't help Clara. She reported him herself. Sarah and I got married. Clara came to the wedding. She looked much older, her posture stooped, her gait unsteady. I knew she hadn't fully recovered, but she came. Olivia and Ethan presented us with our wedding rings. Everyone congratulated us. As I kissed Sarah, Clara slipped away, leaving behind a ring. The ring I had, made for her years ago, risking the wrath of her mother's creditors. We had met as teenagers, fallen in love, built a life together. Now, it was truly over.